So with me today, I have Clayton Payne. Clayton has had an unusual life. He is a man who does what he says, and we're just going to chat today and see where it takes us. So Clayton, welcome. Thank you very much for joining.
Yep.
And we'll kick it off with, you've been to a lot of weird places. Why is that? Or unusual places, I should say.
Yeah, why is that? I'm not really sure why that is. More like I think like it's just one of those things that kind of built, and you kind of. I had like as a growing up as a kid, I had like an obsession with geography. So yeah, my degrees in geography, my master's degrees in national development. It's so like I'm just fascinated by geography, by culture, by everything that sort of falls around that. And I think for me, when I go away, it's not so much because I like hot weather or I like seeing, let's say, a particular building. I like people. I like seeing how people live. And so that kind of has influenced my sort of traveling decision. And I kind of made a promise to myself growing up because my parents never traveled when I was young. So we would literally go back, see the family in Ireland, see the family in Belgium. And that would be kind of all the travel we'd ever do. So I was like, every year I'm going to go somewhere different. I'm going to just, put things into a hat if I have to and just go somewhere different. And that's what I've done. If you do that for enough years, you've been to some pretty wacky places by the end of it.
So where was the first more unusual place?
First place I ever went growing up was so when I left school when I was 17, I actually went to Czechoslovakia. It wasn't long after the sort of fall of communism, so it was still kind of exciting. In those days, there was no internet or anything like that. So it was. I remember there was an advert in the newspaper for a place called B&B Bohemia. Few of my mates I went to school in Ireland, we were like, let's go somewhere, different. So we're like, yeah, Czechoslovakia, that sounds great, And we just booked it off the cuff and we flew to Czechoslovakia and got there. B&B Bohemia was basically this thing which rented people's apartments in these council houses in like brutalist Žižkov, which is like the suburb of Prague. We kind of thought it would be like right in the middle of Prague, overlooking the bridge and all this. No, it was like in this council estate. We got there was people's like family pictures still up and their laundry in the basket and stuff, and like we were just like, whoa, 17-year-olds like straight out of Ireland, like, wow, what's going on here? And then the following year I went interrailing around Eastern Europe and I travelled around America on a Greyhound bus the year after, and then it just kind of built from there and got more and more extreme from that point on.
So talking about the extreme places then, so where was the first perhaps shock to the system that you got from your travels? Or have you ever been shocked?
Yeah, I've been shocked a few times, if I'm honest. I mean, most recently, like I was shocked when I went to Haiti. Obviously because I was aware of the political situation, but I wasn't in the time between when I booked it and when I went, the situation deteriorated significantly. So flew out there. Gangs controlled 80% of the city. The first night I was there, it was like people shooting outside my hotel. My hotel was under serious armed guards. Like it was. I mean, I could go outside, but they kind of said, "Look, if you're outside, don't stand still because there's fires, there's high kidnapping rates, that sort of stuff." And I'd have to pay people danger money to take me around. But yeah, that was a shock. But I've had a number. Probably to Tajikistan, sort of 2008, 2009-ish, and had like driving through the mountains. There was like bandits and stuff. Told us we had to like pay money or they were going to smash our windows. And then I always wear combat trousers a lot, so like my taxi driver was like, "Yeah, it's Colonel." He was like pointing at me, going, "This guy's an army officer, he, like mess you up." I'm like, "Don't bring me into this, dude. I'm just here for like the shared taxi ride through the mountains, But yeah, I've had a lot. Nicaragua in 2004, I got myself in trouble there. Yeah, I've had quite a few places I've been to where I've been like, have I gone a little bit far this time? This is extreme. But it's like anything. I think as you get older, you kind of get used to the danger, and you kind of mitigate it a lot better as you get older.
That's fair hindsight and experience and everything else. But you still do the travel, right? So is it just so when you say you get used to it or you prepare differently, what do you do differently now from what you used to do in the past?
So I think like the biggest rude awakening I had was in Nicaragua in 2004. I was in the north in a city called Leon, and I kind of decided, young, sort of like mid-20s, I can go anywhere. I just sort of like wandered off into, let's say, like the more poor areas, just like looking around and just, like, and again, I'm a white guy, so I'm clearly not Nicaraguan, and I was just sort of milling around, and I got like a group of people sort of surrounded me and started saying, going gringo, with your money, and I used to keep all my money on me at that time, money, passport, everything, because I always had this thing where I met people who had their hotel rooms robbed, and I was like, okay, I'm going to keep everything on me. I'll have to take it off my dead body. And then when you're actually in that situation, you're like, what? Yeah, it's like, what? It's like, ah.
Don't want to be a dead body.
No. So, like, literally, I have these guys around me, and they're like, "Put your money, man." And I'm like, dude, I'm not American. I ain't giving you my money. And they were like, I said, look, you can try and take it off me by force. Probably not in such nice terms or the same, but you can take it off me by force, but I'm going to try and take probably you out with me before I do it. Or you can just let me go and I'll start not waiting for you. Do I look like I've got money? And it was like this Mexican standoff for a few minutes, and then I just pushed past them and they let me go, and I was like, don't be wandering around poor areas on your own, like a stupid tourist, And so from that point on, I kind of regulated how I do things, that if I go into, let's say, more like community areas, especially like those which are like less affluent, I'll do it sort of with like a local person I've met under certain like guises, rather than just being like, look at me, just wandering around your gaff, looking at your where you live, So I think that's kind of, and the thing is I shouldn't have known that as well, because the year before I was in Rio, and it was like people were like, wandering around the favelas, and I was like, I'm not just going to wander around the favelas, and I didn't. I mean, I went to the favelas, but like with people who knew the favelas, so like for me just to be wandering around, it was kind of stupid. But again, I think a little bit, it's like you just get cocky at times, and then you sort of like get kicked back into shape,
I think sometimes though it is the naivety of youth. I did a similar thing in South Africa. I wandered around parts of Joburg that everyone said don't go to, and I actually I had a great time. But I'm probably I'm 5'6", I'm not very threatening. All I had was, do you know that you're white? And this is just after the end of apartheid. I was like, yeah, I do know I'm white. They're like, oh, you're British. Oh, that's okay then. And that was it. But with hindsight, I mean, it could have gone another way. But at that age, I was just so naive and so, I guess so optimistic about the world that it didn't occur to me that people would, take offense to me being there, or take the opportunity of me being there to see something different.
Well, look, I had a similar thing in South Africa, actually. I was in Cape Town, and I actually picked my hotel location by map. Like, because I was getting the boat to St. Helena from there. Like, so I got like a 6-day boat. It was like the old Royal Mail ship that went to St. Helena.
Oh, wow.
I stayed in Cape Town for a couple of nights, and I'm like, yeah, this area is near the port. It's like, it's all right. And it was like dangerous as hell after dark. And like, I remember someone dropped me off at like 6, and like people were grabbing my shirt and stuff. Like, man, all this. And I said to somebody on the boat, I'm like, I told them what happened. They go, "Oh yeah, we don't walk around dark around there." So we don't even stop at traffic lights around there when after dark. Okay. But again, I think it's just you just kind of like I think there's always a certain level of planning you do, but every area is so distinct in terms of like what can and can't happen that you do make some like dodgy choices sometimes. And like for me, it was like I'm there 2 days and then I'm not going back. So when I came back from St. Lucia, I stayed in a completely different part of the city. I was like, where do I stay? Which isn't dangerous after dark.
Lessons learned.
Yeah, they were like, yeah, you should not stay there. You should stay in like gardens or something like that. Was I think I stayed on the way back.
So you said that obviously you didn't travel much as a kid. I mean, actually, because you're half Flemish, half Irish. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
So you kind of got to go to Brussels and you got to go to Ireland, obviously, but the places that you have chosen to go to are often off the beaten path. What do you get out of those trips apart from your love of geography? But is it the learning? Is it just the cultural understanding? Is it just that you like to wander around somewhere new?
I think there is an element of remembering who you are as a person. It's how I always put it. Is like for me is I think we get so bogged down in our normal day-to-day life and our the way we view the world in a very distinct way. That I find when I go to places that are very different, and the more different they are, the more I feel like this that it really gives you new clarity on life and how we are as humans and how we're interacting with our own like resources and people around us and that sort of stuff. So I think that's really what I do it for. I think it was like I remember, like I say, like I think like Nicaragua, like 2004, I was there, and I just remember it felt like a mask cracking, like because I was so business, working, buy a house, all this sort of crap, and then it was like I'd kind of forgotten who I was in a sense, and then I went and I just remember thinking, I like met this American girl who was traveling through Nicaragua, and we just went to like some music festivals, and we went to sort of like the volcanoes and the bubbling mud bits, and it was just like I was me again. And I kind of get that a lot when I go away. I step out in Clayton, the work guy, and the the whatever else I am in my life, the roles I fill, and I become just me again, if that makes sense.
No, that's wonderful, and I think that's a really good lesson because, we get caught up, whether you're a business owner or an employee, it doesn't matter because you get into this cycle, don't you, of work, one way or the other, and to have the ability to step back. And I like the fact that because you go to the more off the beaten track places, you're more likely to find something different. A lot of the touristy places, it's kind of same but different. You could be anywhere in the world and still get fish and chips, or you can be anywhere and still go to an Irish pub. But if you go to touristy places, but if you're going off the beaten path, then you don't even have those, I won't call them creatures of comforts, but those familiar setups. It can be completely new. And I guess it strips you back to, well, who am I and how do I handle these situations?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the thing is I think it's like it's also doing something that scares you a little bit as well matters in life, and I think for me it's visiting Haiti, for example, it should scare me, and it does in a sense, but at the same time my rationale is also it's fine for the 3-4 million people who live here, so why can't I do I can like it's good enough for them, why can't I get involved, see what life's like, I think and it's about how do I handle myself in those situations. And I just remember the very distinct thing when I got off the plane from Haiti back in America, just being like, I can actually walk around again. And it's that thing, like things you take for granted when you place yourself in a completely different situation. like makes you realize how lucky you are in so many ways as well. Like that we can just go down the shop and buy
Walk
some
around.
cigarettes or do whatever, and there's no fear of anything. As opposed to when I was there and they're telling me about the local nuns just got kidnapped and so they can't send their kids to school today, and all this sort of like madness, So I think also
It helps to give perspective, doesn't it, of what we have and how lucky we truly are. And helps to kind of, I guess, keep you grateful maybe of the, like I'm a massive fan of the NHS because I lived in Russia, got hit by a car and went to a Russian hospital, which wasn't terrible because I had travel insurance. There was a student, but if I hadn't had insurance, it'd have been a very different experience. And I'm forever grateful that, one, I always take insurance, but also that the NHS is what it is. Warts and all, it is still brilliant compared to other places, in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fact that you can just go in there and you don't have to fill in forms and like prove funds and this sort of chaos. It makes a big difference, like to the overall experience for sure. I actually work for the NHS. I don't know if I've told you that before. Have
I? No, I didn't know that.
Did you not know?
One of your many jobs.
Well,
no.
No, so I'll tell you what it was. I actually worked in the NHS during COVID. So when my plan was, I exited the business I ran for like 20 odd years, and it was like about a 6-7 month handover period, and it was like once I'm done, I'm going to like all these wacky places. I'm going to Pitcairn Island. I'm going to like all these crazy places in the South Pacific. I exited March 2020. So just in time for the whole world to just shut down. And then I was like,
wow,
I'm like knackered now, man. I can't go anywhere. I'd been to India in February, and I was flying back from Kuwait. So I'd been to Bahrain, India, and Kuwait, and things were just starting to shut down. Like I was in Kuwait, and Kuwait was like, we're not letting in Italians, or we're not letting in Chinese people or Hong Kong. And I was like, whoa, this is a bit weird. And then by the time I got back, it was finished. And so I ended up working in my local hospital on the COVID wards because I was like, and again, this is going to sound like, oh, no, great life. I was just kind of curious, if I'm honest. I just kind of wanted to see what was going on firsthand. As bad as that sounds, I was like, well, I'm kind of not doing anything. And my parents don't live in this country. And I'm not like connected. Well, and at the time it was like 5% of people could die. And I'm thinking, am I in that bottom 5% of like most vulnerable? Like, no. And I was just like, I'm just gonna go and like work and see what happens. I'm like, let's do it. And they were desperate for people.
I love that about your personality there. You're like, I don't know, so let's give it a go.
Yeah.
I mean,
everyone was freaking out.
At least you're getting first-hand info.
Well, that was the thing. It was like everyone was freaking out. I'm like, yeah, I'll go and stand on the front lines and like, be there with my mask and stuff, and like, yeah, come on in. It's the COVID ward, A&E department. I worked through the first sort of 6 months or something of the pandemic in the COVID ward. So.
And again, so like your travel to slightly unusual places, the curiosity is really important to you, I guess. But also, it does feel a little bit like you have a how far can I push myself kind of mentality. Like, what happens if I just do this one thing more? Is that right?
A little bit, yeah, for sure. I think there's almost a thing where I'm like a little bit outdoing myself continuously, and like I kind of dial it back, and then I'll push it again. So it's like, the year before I went to Haiti, I went to El Salvador and Guatemala, and that was a little bit dialed back from, maybe going to Bolivia the year before that in Colombia, and then you're like, okay, Haiti, let's do it. Flights are cheap. I can navigate that, and then you just get there, and you're like, God, I've gone a little bit far this time, but I went to Ukraine in 2014 during the revolution there, which was pretty wild. Like so, and I mean, my favourite thing to do actually when it comes to travelling is going to unrecognised states. That's like been a passion of mine for years. So like visiting Somaliland. So in Somalia, I've been to Somalia, like been to Abkhazia, South Ossetia, places like that. Like so again, very very unusual places, very 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 weird setups. Because I mean, if you go to, let's say, are you aware of Transnistria?
I was going to say Transnistria. Yeah. I do know it.
Yeah. So again, it's part of Moldova. But when you go there, because it's not recognised, they have their own currency, the Transnistrian ruble. It's not on the banking system, so you can't use credit cards there or Visa cards. So there's like 2 ATMs in the country. You withdraw in like dollars or euros and change it up. So it's a pure cash economy. Yeah, it's really, really weird place to just go in. They've built like a beach on the river. It's on the Danube. They've got like a beach and stuff, and just really odd places to go and visit, because they're there, but they're detached from reality. I kind of like those sort of things as well. So, yeah.
And how do you get into those states, I guess? Obviously they exist and some people recognise them, but not universally. So are there extra steps that you have to take to go, and also other extra steps you have to take because you're there?
So there's inherent risks and there's extra steps, and it depends on the country. So the inherent risks is you can't get insured in most countries. So if you go to Abkhazia or you go to Transnistria or Somaliland, you're uninsurable because you're not in a UN recognised state. So there's nothing. That might vary to an insurance company, but in my experience, most insurance company wouldn't actually insure you to go there. In terms of extra steps you have to take, depends on the country. Some are easier than others. So Somaliland, believe it or not, is actually quite an easy one. There's actually the Somaliland mission is actually in London. So as long as you go there and fill in a visa, you're good to go. You can fly via Dubai and land in Hargeisa, and you don't even have to go into like Mogadishu or anything like that. You can literally fly straight into Somaliland. So that's straightforward. Transnistria's easy. Like you can literally just jump on the bus from the kitchen out. If you're there more than a couple of days, you have to register on some form which is in Russian. But it's not like crazy hard. And like if you stand at the window long enough and bang, they'll give you one in English. You ask them like 3 or 4 times. Abkhazia, South Ossetia are definitely more difficult. So these are breakaway states in the state of Georgia. I'm very fortunate with Abkhazia that I have friends there, and I do a lot of my academic work on Abkhazia. So I'm actually published in a number of journals on my work on Abkhazia, and I'm actually published in the Abkhazia 1992-2022 book. I was one of the contributors for that. But it's a bit more difficult because you have to provide an actual separate visa. And ever since they closed Inguri Bridge access, which is the Georgian side of Abkhazia, it's like traverse point. Now you have to go into Russia, enter from Sochi, and get a double entry Russian visa, which obviously at the moment has its own challenges as well. But then you also need to get the Abkhazian Ministry of Foreign Affairs to approve your visit, which I've never had a problem with personally. But when I was at the border before, there was people there who'd been there for like a day and couldn't get in. So I'm not sure if that was just them not being efficient or I just got special treatment because of who I was. So I'd like to say the first, but it's probably more like the second. And South Ossetia is very similar. South Ossetia is arguably harder to get into because it's a much smaller country, so it's only like 40,000 people. And there are a lot more. Like Abkhazia wants to be independent; it sees itself as independent. South Ossetia wants to be part of Russia, so it has a very different vibe about it, So yeah, it depends on the place, but there's a real problem with, let's say, things like for like insurance and that sort of stuff. So if you are a little bit nervy about going anywhere without insurance, that's probably one of the most difficult things, to be honest.
I don't have a good track record with cars, but other than that, I don't mind. So what was it about
Abkhazia?
Go on.
Yeah, no, Abkhazia.
Yeah, what is it about? What is it about it that drew you to it in the first place? Because you wrote about it as well. So what is it about that region?
So I find the Caucasus as an area that geographically is fascinating because it's sort of like the confluence of like European, sort of Persian, like Turkic influences all sort of crashing into one another, and then you have like national roots, and their history is very diverse linguistically, but also culturally. I've done a lot of work researching areas like Chechnya and Ingushetia. So the Chechens, obviously, like there was the Chechen War in the late 1990s, early 2000s. But just the whole region, again, is very diverse. And there's all these wacky claims, like a lot of claims which are like based on sorry. A lot of these wacky claims are based on what they call autochthony. Like, I didn't even know what that word meant, if I'm honest, 10 years ago. But autochthony means basically originality to the land. So they're always arguing about who's the most original to the land. So the Armenians, for example, get a very hard time, as well as the Ossetians, because they speak a Persian language, an Indo-Iranic language. And so they say, well, you can't be original to the land because you don't speak, a Caucasian-style language. But again, like, how long is original to the land? I mean, they've been there over 1,000 years, provably. But Abkhazia for me is one of the most interesting because of how it's become independent. Also, its history in terms of like Stalin's Georgianization of Abkhazia. The fact that the West is absolutely reluctant to grant it any kind of independence, like legally. So it's been pushed into Russia's arms since the 2008 sort of Russian-Georgian War. And just the amount of propaganda that's gone around with it, and the Georgians are horrific at propaganda with them, and their whole thing is, you're not real people from Abkhazia, you're maybe from the North Caucasus somewhere, and this area has always been ours.
Right.
And then there's like these crazy propaganda tools from the 50s, which are used then to back up these claims, and it's a really weird interwoven mix, and like the more you get into it, the more it's like, wow. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm not saying one side's right or the other side's right or whatever, but it's a real mess, and like I just find it fascinating, and the country itself is beautiful. I mean, like, it was like a playground of the world for Russians during the Soviet Union times, and it's got beautiful caves, and like as a holiday spot, yeah, it's lovely, But again, it's got a fascinating history behind it, amazing foods, like great national tradition. So it's somewhere I really like. I find the whole thing kind of fascinating, to be honest.
No, I mean, I studied Russian at university and history, and so I kind of get that region's allure when it comes to the complexities of it and its shifting face over time. And I think I lived in Siberia, and for me, it was really interesting to understand that Russians aren't Western in the way that we assume they are, because they look the same, and it's the same with that region, that there's such a mix of tribal history, people traversing through different places. It creates a really unique culture and a really unique way of life sometimes, and the claim to land, is a challenge. How far back do you go?
Yeah, it's mad, right? And also, what Stalin did in the region, like deporting the 7 nations or whatever it was, and they're tough people, man. They are tough people when you actually meet them. And I mean, there's a reason why some of the best UFC fighters come out of that region is because they are some tough people, really tough people. But again, I find them lovely as well. Like to actually go and see, I've spent time in Chechnya and in Grozny, in Nazran, in Ingushetia, and they couldn't be more welcoming and nice and to me. So I have a sad bad word against any of them, to be honest.
Well, I think that this is it, right? People are people. There are good people, there are bad people everywhere you go. I'm very much of the belief that people behave to how you treat them. And I have probably a rather very stinted view that everyone's lovely for the most part, and everyone turns out to me to be lovely for the most part. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy from that point of view. But it's if you treat people with respect, the vast majority will respond in kind, I do believe. And I've yet to be proved wrong. It sounds like you have a similar experience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say, if you said to me, which country have you been to where the people were the least friendly? I'd probably say Australia, to be honest, because I've been, people in Haiti were lovely, they're really nice. People in El Salvador were fantastic. People in Bolivia were nice, people in Tajikistan. I mean, I went out and ate and went with families, and do you know what I mean? So it's not like, in Australia, they wouldn't serve me a coffee because the restaurant was closed. So it's kind of do you know what I mean? So it's like if you said where are people the nastiest you've ever been, it was like probably Queensland.
Not that I want Australia bash, but I do know what you mean, because I went there after being in South Africa, and I found everything to be way more expensive, and people were way more angry than my time in South Africa. And so I've only been there once, in fairness. But in comparison to a lot of the other countries I've been to, I found there was more of an aggression there than I experienced even in Russia, for example. I mean, Russia has its challenges, but people are people, and I've always been welcomed into random homes, and just having that curiosity that you have to explore, talk to people, learn about them. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure.
And talking about your curiosity then, so you are standing in the election.
I am.
Randomly.
I am, yeah.
Do you want to tell us why that came about?
So I'm kind of I think I have obviously quite an anti-imperialist mindset. I think a lot of it's to do with traveling. I think a lot of it's to do with having seen the world, and I'm also very much somebody who believes in working class people, and that I believe in equality of opportunity for all. I think everybody should have the chance to do the best. I think we should all have the same schools. I think we should all have the same healthcare, and that money shouldn't buy anyone a better place, if that makes sense. I think, and so I've been part of the Workers' Party since its inception in 2019, 2020. I was a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, who's the first Labour leader I actually did support, because I never liked Blair. I don't like neoliberalism, if I'm honest. I believe that if the state has one objective, it should be to educate and look after those who need it the most. And so the election came up, and the Workers' Party, they're obviously a smallish party, and they were like, do you want to run in Peterborough where we should get a reasonable turnout? And I was like, I haven't really got time, and there's somebody in Peterborough who wants to do it. So I was like, look, I'd rather just stand in my own constituency and get mauled. Get absolutely mauled in my own constituency, but I'd rather just do it, it's why not? As election, I mean, why can't anyone stand for anything? I mean, we all moan, we hate the Tories, we hate Labour, we hate the Dems, and they're all the same. Yeah, and they are, they've all got corporate influences and stuff, so I'm and I think when we spoke before, you said you vote tactically, and I think that's the problem. I think we all look at it and we go, Well, I don't want the blue boys in, so let's vote for the red boys. And I want the red boys in, let's vote for the yellow boys. Or let's just vote for whoever.
Yeah.
I don't like the electoral system. I don't like the first past the post system, but we are where we are with it. So let's just give them a bloody nose. Let's not play their games. So I was like, yeah, I'll just stand.
And it's interesting because
it's a 500 deposit. Yeah, the voting gives me back.
Oh, that's right. But I think your point around not voting tactically is interesting, because the way I have always viewed politics is, I agree with you that the central parties are much of a match. But I also sit there going that, for example, I care about the environment. The Greens would be an obvious choice for me, but I know where I live, they won't get in. But as you say, perhaps if everyone who thought they'd vote for the Greens voted for them, they would get in, but we all go, they're not going to get in, so I'll vote tactically so that at least we have change. I don't know how we can shift it so that we don't feel the need to vote tactically. Or maybe it's because I don't want to keep the same. That's the thing, isn't it? I don't want to be stuck with what we've got because they've had a chance.
No.
Let's give someone else a chance now. But you are right, and what I really love about you is the fact that you said you do what you say on the tin. You want to see the change. You stand for it. You recognise you might not win, and that's cool. But at least you're doing it.
Yeah.
How, in your mind, can we get more people to stop being tactical, I guess?
I think the thing is that there's like with domino effect with everything, is that if enough people vote against, they do the same in America, vote Republican, vote Democrat, and you're like, Trump or Biden, like, what? Or Trump and Clinton, it's like, is there two less likable characters if we tried? And then they go, what, you can't vote for someone else because they won't get in? And it's like, but everybody feels the same way, and yet you're forced to pick a side. So you're not forced to pick a side. They're just telling you you've got to pick a side. And if everyone stops picking those sides, then actually we'll end up in a situation where the right people get in, rather than, it's like in my area, it's like the Labour, so I live in a highly conservative area. Everybody moans continuously about the Conservatives. And then Labour Party, they bring in somebody who's from a completely different part of the country. They drop them in. And everyone's like, well, they don't care about us. And they're like, no, of course not. But the Labour Party doesn't care. It's like, this is our candidate. You have to vote for them if you want Labour. And, people said, actually, I'm not going to vote for them. I'm just going to. But again, an interesting tactic I learned was I did some campaigning with George Galloway, with the party in what was the name of the area? Batley and somewhere else. Anyway, but they said what you have to do is you have to bring it down to a 2-horse race, and you have to be one of them horses, otherwise people won't vote for you. So you have to go around and say to people, no, this other party, they're already dead in the water. Everyone's already voting for us. Look at these pledges. Because that's the only way you can get people to actually shift their vote, is if they think, oh, well, this is the alternative. The alternative is this one, not this one, And I think we came third in that election. Yeah. But again, it seems like, I understand that's what you got to do, but it's also kind of dishonest as well, right? When really what we should be doing is saying to people, vote for what you actually believe in. But again, the problem is most people just try to watch the TV and go, yeah, those are some great talking points. BBC. Thanks for that. That's how I'm gonna. I don't know. It's hard. Politics is hard because I think there's too many people who vote who don't pay any real crazy interest in what's going on.
I think you're right. For me, voting is really important because 100 years ago I wouldn't have had the vote. So by God, I'm going to vote because people have literally died for the right for me to vote. But then you sit and you reflect, going, but actually, am I using it in the best way? Because did these women campaign and protest, and some men, to kind of go, well, now, Pippa, you have a choice of someone you don't want someone else you don't want, but who isn't the first person you don't want. Is that really the best use of this system? And you're right, maybe it isn't.
Oh.
Well, it definitely isn't actually, but it's getting that change and getting people involved again, and particularly with the last sort of 10 years, the fatigue of the nation with the Brexit fallout, the COVID fallout, even the noise from over the water with the Trump and everything else going on. We get it all, and you're sitting going, what's really changed? The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and will my vote matter? And I guess that's the thing to find out.
Yeah, and like I say, if we don't change the way we vote and actually vote who we want rather than just thinking, well, I don't want them, so I'm going to vote for them. And that's why local council elections work so well with independents, because people are like, well, I don't want Conservative, I don't want Labour, so I'm just going to vote for this independent who, like, when you look into them, they used to be a Conservative who was kicked out of the party or something. So you're voting for an ex-Conservative rather than Conservative. And you're like,
a hidden Conservative.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I'm standing up against Conservatives by voting for someone who used to be Conservative, like, rather than actually going, well, this person actually has our best interests, in mind. And it's like, it's so finicky. I mean, I remember standing at election one year and in the local council election, because my name was lower on the poll because my surname's Pete, people would just go X, 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 and then someone else. And like, because we had 3 candidates in the party, I was standing in, like, and mine was bottom, I got less votes than the others because obviously the one at the top got the most, the second one got, and it would just be like, oh, there are two of those and one of those, It was just, that's how finicky the whole thing is.
That feels so wrong. Yeah, that is terrible when you think about it.
But it is also the way it is, and you have to realise that. And that's why, like, for me, like, the political thing, I'm going to lose. I don't care. Because you know what? Like, it is what it is. But at least it opens the doors for somebody to say, I'm going to stand up against whatever this is,
No, I respect that. That's very admirable. So where's your next adventure?
Well, I mean, I'm away next week. Yeah. But nothing exciting. I'm just flying to America. I've got tickets for the Argentina-Chile game. But I'm stopping off in Alaska for a day just because I could. I have to go to an airline. I've only ever been inside the airport before, so I figured I'd have a look at Iceland quickly while I was there. But yeah, I think after that, I'm gonna have to do a hat draw. It's kind of between, at the moment, it's between Chile. I really want to go to Misiones in Argentina and Asunción in Paraguay. I think I'll probably go there next.
Okay.
So I don't know much about Misiones. So Misiones is the part of Argentina. It just sits just below Paraguay. So you have Asunción.
Okay.
And then you have the Misiones region of Argentina. And I've been watching a lot of conspiracy theory stuff recently. And there's this program called
Be careful.
called Hunting Hitler. And it's like them
them
tracking down all these old Nazis. And they all end up in Misiones in Argentina. So I want to go there and see if I can find any crazy German sort of
hidden Germans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hunt them out. I'm gonna do my own hunting Hitler thing. See if I can find Hitler's stowed away grandchildren or something.
Oh, my life. Well, that sounds awesome. I hope you have lots of fun with that, if that's where you go. And if not, I'm sure you'll get there eventually.
But I also want to go to Liberia. I've been sort of playing the idea of Liberia for a while as well. I kind of fancy West Africa as well. So, yeah, my problem is, man, this is why I always do it. I get a hat. All right, send the destinations on there. I put them in a hat, I pull one out, and I just book it. Because if you leave me to my own devices, I go, well, I'm going to go here, and then actually I'm going to go here as well. And I'm going, well, I haven't been to Asia for a long time, so I really like to go to East Timor, and it just becomes a nightmare. So I just throw them all in a hat, pick one out. So yeah, you'll only know where I'm going.
At least it gets the decision made.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Well, it's been very interesting. Thank you ever so much. I hope that you keep having interesting journeys. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
That's right. Have a wonderful day.